If you have a dog, watch them the next time they go to sleep. They might circle a few times on the rug, scratch at the cushion, and collapse into a heavy ball, exposing their throat and belly to the room. It looks completely ordinary, a mundane moment in a quiet house. But if you strip away the modern living room, the drywall, and the electricity, what you are looking at is an absolute evolutionary miracle. That creature sharing your space is the direct, unbroken descendant of a lethal apex predator. For hundreds of thousands of years, wolves and humans were bitter ecological rivals. We hunted the same migratory herds, moved through the same frozen valleys, and relied on the same complex pack strategies to survive. Meeting in the wilderness at night meant a terrifying fight to the death. Yet somehow, against every established rule of evolutionary biology, that ancient rivalry dissolved. We didn't just learn to tolerate each other, we fused our destinies completely. How a lethal killer transformed into a creature that reads our emotions, protects our families, and sleeps at the foot of our bed is the greatest mystery in human history. The standard explanation was always simple and intuitive. A human hunter found a litter of helpless wolf pups in a den, raised them among the tribe, and deliberately bred the tamest individuals over time. It's a neat story that paints humans as the master directors of nature, but modern biology suggests it is almost certainly a myth. Wolves are not large dogs. Even when raised by humans from birth with constant affection, a wolf pup reaches maturity and its wild programming takes over. They do not look to humans for direction. They challenge authority, and their predatory drive remains entirely intact. An ancient human group attempting to raise wild wolves in a small nomadic camp would be inviting an unpredictable disaster into their living space. More importantly, the generational mathematics do not work. To turn a wild wolf into a dog through deliberate breeding requires a level of genetic understanding and isolation that Paleolithic humans simply did not possess. They were trying to survive the Ice Age day by day, not running a multi-century artificial selection experiment. The explanation that scientists now favor is much more fascinating. Dogs were not domesticated by us. They domesticated themselves. To understand how, you have to look at a concept known to wildlife biologists as flight distance. Every wild animal carries an invisible psychological boundary line. If a threat gets closer than that specific distance, the animal's nervous system triggers an immediate response. It either flees in terror or attacks in defense. In ancient wolves, that flight distance was massive. They would detect human scent from a mile away and vanish. But as modern humans became highly successful cooperative hunters, we created something the ancient world had never seen before: predictable piles of high-calorie waste. The perimeters of human camps became gold mines of leftover bones, fat, and scraps. For a wolf during a harsh winter, those trash heaps were the difference between life and death. But to access them, a wolf had to do something that defied millions of years of programming. It had to cross its own flight distance and willingly walk toward the scent of its greatest rival. This created a powerful evolutionary filter. Wolves with naturally high stress hormones could not stomach the proximity to humans and stayed far out in the shadows. But wolves born with a slight genetic quirk, a naturally lower adrenaline response, and a smaller flight distance, could tolerate the camp perimeter. They ate better, survived winters at much higher rates, and passed those low fear traits onto their pups. Over generations, an entirely new subpopulation of wolves emerged. They were no longer wilderness hunters, they were camp followers. They specialized in navigating the human boundary. They weren't being actively tamed by human hands. They were adapting to a new ecological niche we inadvertently created. Biologists call this the survival of the friendliest. It was a slow, unconscious sorting process that took place in the deep darkness along the flickering edges of our firelight. But this introduces a bizarre biological puzzle. If the environment was only selecting for a behavior, a lack of fear, why did the animal's physical appearance change so radically? Wolves have erect ears, yellow eyes, straight tails, and camouflage coats. Dogs possess a chaotic explosion of physical variety, including floppy ears, brown eyes, curly tails, and spotted fur. How does changing a personality completely rewrite anatomy? The answer came from a famous experiment started in 1959 by Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belyaev in Siberia.
He began breeding wild silver foxes with a strict parameter. He only allowed the least aggressive, least fearful foxes to reproduce. Within just a few generations, the foxes didn't just become calm, their bodies morphed. Their ears flopped downward, their tails began to curl, and their coats developed patches of white fur. They even began to bark and wag their tails. Belyaev had uncovered what is now known as domestication syndrome. It turns out that traits like fear and adrenaline are deeply linked to the physical development of an embryo. When you select an animal for a calm disposition, you're actually selecting for reduced adrenal gland activity. The building blocks that form the adrenal glands come from a specific cluster of embryonic cells called the neural crest. But those exact same cells are also responsible for developing ear cartilage, jaw length, tail straightness, and fur pigmentation.
By selecting for a peaceful mind, nature was accidentally short-circuiting the physical blueprint of the animal. The floppy ears and spotted coats of our pets are not aesthetic features we chose. They are the physical residue of a biological peace treaty. As thousands of years passed, this transformation anchored itself into their DNA. In 2017, geneticist Bridget von Holt at Princeton University published a study investigating the specific genes separating dogs from wolves. They discovered that domestic dogs possess a unique genetic deletion on chromosome 6 that is completely absent in wolves. In human genetics, a near-identical deletion causes a rare condition known as Williams-Boren syndrome. Humans born with this syndrome are characterized by an exceptionally hypersocial personality, a profound lack of social inhibition, and an overwhelming desire to love and trust everyone. Dogs, quite literally, are wolves born with a genetic mutation for unconditional love. They are biologically programmed to seek our companionship, and their brains flood with oxytocin when they make eye contact with a human. This genetic shift transformed a tentative relationship into a history-altering alliance. By roughly 20,000 years ago, the first true domestic dogs had fully separated from wolves, completely altering the trajectory of human survival. Imagine an Ice Age landscape where you are tracking a mammoth through a blizzard. Without a dog, you are a vulnerable primate with limited senses. With a dog, your capabilities expand exponentially. Their sense of smell can follow a cold scent trail through snow, and their hearing can detect an approaching predator in the pitch black long before your ears register a sound. They could corner dangerous game and defend the camp with their lives. This symbiotic alliance provided modern humans with the critical competitive edge to outcompete other hominids like the Neanderthals. We did not conquer the planet alone. We did it with a partner. Yet to view dogs purely as living tools is to miss the emotional gravity of what occurred. They became deeply integrated members of our families. This connection is written in the ancient earth. In Germany, archaeologists excavated the Bone Oberkassel burial, dating back over 14,000 years. Inside, they found the remains of a man and a woman buried with immense care, and resting alongside them was the skeleton of a young dog. Analysis of the bones proved the dog had survived severe canine distemper virus for 3 distinct months before dying. In a resource-scarce world, a sick puppy offered no practical benefit. The only reason it survived is because humans chose to cradle it, clean its fur, and keep it warm by the fire. They nursed a dying animal simply because they loved it, and they buried it in their family plot to ensure they would face the next journey together. Today, we live in a world of concrete and glass, insulated within climate-controlled rooms, believing we're completely independent of nature. Yet every evening, millions of us step outside with a leash in hand, walking shoulder to shoulder with a creature whose ancestors once hunted hours through the snow. When your dog looks up at you and wags its tail, you are experiencing the continuation of a 20,000-year-old conversation. We did not conquer the wild by destroying every monster in the dark. We conquered it by inviting one of its most formidable predators inside, sharing our food, and turning an enemy into an eternal friend. We built our civilization on that cross-species trust, and the beautiful evidence of that ancient treaty is currently sleeping peacefully on your couch.